afternoon in Parliament and delivered what will undoubtedly go down as a most historic and epochal presentation in the budget debate. Certainly, as far as presentations from a head of government in this country goes. The Prime Minister, listeners, exhibits considerable growth when you observe him and see him in operation. He presents a picture of someone who commands the space, has grown into the role, and indeed knows what he's about. You get the clear sense that he has a safe pair of hands, he is a visionary, he knows the direction in which he's seeking to take Jamaica, he knows what the Jamaican people require, desire, and would benefit from, and he, I dare say, is delivering. When I sat behind this microphone on Wednesday, I commenced my assessment of the contribution to the budget debate by opposition leader Mark Golding by setting out what the assignment was. And similarly, I'm going to do that in respect of the Prime Minister this morning. Because when something happens, you have to step back for a moment, pause for a bit, and begin at the beginning. So the Prime Minister, head of government, was speaking yesterday, making his 10th contribution to the budget debate as Prime Minister of Jamaica, having taken office in March of 2016. He was speaking yesterday in a context where the administration he leads would have been in office for just about 9 years, having taken office, as I said just now, in March of 2016. There is every indication, to the extent that elections are constitutionally due in September of this year, there is every indication that this budget cycle, this budget debate, is the last before the people of Jamaica are called upon to make that important decision. Indeed, the Prime Minister closed out his presentation last afternoon with what I would like to think of as that kind of altar call. So when you sit in church or you join services online, the pastor would wax warm in relation to his sermon. The pastor evangelizes, presents, makes the case, and at the back end of making that case, you would often have that altar call. The Prime Minister essentially did that last evening. He had a lengthy vigil. It was just about 5 hours, probably 4.5 hours plus. But so much of what was presented last afternoon needed to have been presented. So let me go back to the start. What was the Prime Minister's assignment yesterday? Well, first of all, especially as I said just now, given the context, this is a budget going into an election. As a man who has been head of government for the past 9 years, you would logically have to have accounted for your stewardship. So you have to come and present your report card. Your parents send you to school, then pay them hard-earned money for you to enroll. You went to classes, you did assignments, you did final exams. What is of moment? Your report card is of moment. The Prime Minister presented his report card yesterday, as he would have been required to do. The Prime Minister also would have needed to articulate the direction in which he's taking Jamaica. He did so yesterday. So in terms of what was required, your report card to account for your stewardship, as it were, of Enterprise Jamaica, And of course, articulating a vision. Why should you be entrusted with leading this country of ours for the next 5 years? What are you planning to do were you afforded a third successive term of office? And so it was very important for the Prime Minister to have attempted, at least, to take the Jamaican people into his confidence and present to them in no uncertain terms what would be in the offing were they to elect him to a third successive term of office. The Prime Minister, in concluding his contribution to the budget debate, used the word prospectus. He indicated that his speech was not necessarily a manifesto. It wasn't a wish list. It wasn't a dream. People who are dreaming are people who have their eyes closed. He speaks to having his eyes open because he is a visionary. He is envisaging things. So dreamers dream. Visionaries envisage. And so he presented what he describes as a prospectus. Why should you make a determination as to entrusting him with another term of office? Consider the options. One man coming with his wish list, as it were. One man coming with a suite of promises. He is giving up a lot of revenue based on what he proposes, but at the same time promising to do so much more, so you get the clear case that they did not find it important to cost their budget proposals, Mark Golding that is, because they are largely in the realm of a wish list. But what you got yesterday was an appropriately costed suite of proposals. What you got yesterday was an appropriate and coherent outline of the things that need to be addressed in this country in order to get us to the destination we desire, in order to secure the outcomes we desire. Is Enterprise Jamaica a perfect enterprise this morning? The answer is no. Are we, however, considerably further advanced from where we were when this administration took office in March of 2016? The answer is an emphatic yes. The Prime Minister made the point last afternoon when he touched on the state of public health care in the country, that we have made strides, but we are not where we need to be. And that is a degree of honesty that any well-thinking Jamaican can appreciate on a morning like this. My own grade, you would have heard me giving Mark Golding a 4.5 to 5%. He would have lost marks considerably because he did not have credible costing to his budget, among other things. My own grade to the Prime Minister this morning is a 9 out of 10. I told you when I assessed Favour Williams' contribution to the budget debate that by nature I'm a hard taskmaster and I mark hard. The Prime Minister last afternoon could have been a bit tighter in the use of time. There were programmatic outlines in respect of which the Prime Minister could have been a bit tighter. So for me, he lost marks in that regard. But in terms of appropriately contextualizing the budget debate, appropriately responding to some of the narratives that have been advanced in this budget debate, in terms of setting out a cogent, coherent, credible, and compelling outline of the direction in which Jamaica needs to move in and what his stewardship in that regard has been, he scored heavily in my view. And of course, the proposals, the announcements made by the Prime Minister, which in my view, listeners, touch every nook and cranny of this country of ours. It touches every segment of the Jamaican population, bar none. From the little old lady in Crofts Hill to that young, vulnerable ward of the state who will be a beneficiary under the Prime Minister's Hope for Children Trust Fund. They are in this budget. When you speak about a people-centered budget, because there are some among us who will throw around words, they are engaged largely in sloganeering. They will tell you about loving people and caring for the masses. But we know the platform on which you are able to care, the platform on which you are truly able to impact people's lives. And that is a platform of responsibility. And as the Prime Minister would have said several times over in the presentation last afternoon, drawing, of course, on what Fiverr Williams said when she spoke, you are irresponsible if you elect to party with the rent money. If you take your picnic school book money or lunch money, extra lesson money, or if you take the supermarket money and go a betting shop, if you take the supermarket money and go party with it, or go club with it, you are essentially being an irresponsible steward of the affairs of your household. Jamaica is like a household. For the things that are desired to happen in this country, it begins with faithful stewardship. It begins with responsible management of our affairs. It begins with good economic management. I heard my colleague Dr. Nadine Spence elsewhere in Radioland this morning making an observation with which I concur. She made the point that here on the Mona campus, for youngsters like her who grew up in the 90s largely and would have been here on the Mona campus in the early 2000s, for us as Jamaicans, we would be ridiculed by our counterparts from the Eastern and Southern Caribbean. So when we would interact with our peers from Trinidad and Barbados in particular, Antigua, St. Lucia, all the others in the Eastern Caribbean, those guys would boast about things. Many of them were coming here to the UA based on tuition support from their government. In other words, their tertiary education was free. People like the Antiguans would come here free of cost. Yes? But for us in Jamaica, we would feel like a poorer cousin. They had nice stuff, but we didn't. That is the Jamaica we had not so long ago. Throughout the course of this morning, I'm going to take the time to announce or espouse some of the key announcements from the Prime Minister last afternoon. Because as I said moments ago, the Prime Minister's contribution to the budget debate was laden with announcements, goodies essentially, things that touch every cross-section, every nook and cranny of Jamaica. And that is good. That was absolutely good. Among the more profound of the announcements last afternoon in the Parliament was that having to do with bringing the coveted dream of home ownership more within the reach of ordinary working class Jamaicans. Let's get into it. At present, The NHT loan ceiling stands at $7.5 million for an individual NHT borrower. Based on what was announced last afternoon, that will now be moved to 9 million Jamaican dollars. At present, the loan amount that two NHT applicants, for example, common law partners, two siblings, a wife and a husband, a young professional couple just starting out and so on. At present, if they are applying for an NHT benefit, they have a loan ceiling of $15 million. Their Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, has elected to increase that to $17 million. At present, 3 applicants to the NHT, let us say 3 siblings, they are eligible for a loan ceiling, a loan amount of $21 million. Those 3 persons coming together, those 3 siblings, for example, coming together, will now be eligible for a loan ceiling of $23 million. There has also been increases for reconstruction, increases for construction on land owned by an NHT borrower. There will be 50,000 scholarships via the NHT this year in commemorating the NHT's 50th anniversary. You'd call it essentially the NHT's Silver Jubilee. So the home improvement loan via the NHT, because as we know, people do have families and households, listeners, that expand. At the time you may have gotten your NHT house, or your house generally, you may have had a 2-bedroom outfit, but the family has expanded. You have had a couple children, you have had 3 children. So the home improvement loan at the NHT is moving from the current $3.5 million to $5 million. You can add on a room, expand the living room, expand the kitchen. This Prime Minister wants the Jamaican people to think big and do big things. And of course, there's been a reduction in the point at which you become eligible for a home improvement loan under the NHT. Because previously, you can only access an NHT home improvement loan after 10 years. That has now been lowered to 7 years. The minimum wage has been increased yet again. It will now move from 15,000 Jamaican dollars to 16,000 Jamaican dollars. And based on when this administration took office in March 2016, there has been a 162% increase in the minimum wage since March 2016, where the minimum wage stood at $6,200. It has now gone to $16,000. And this is for a 40-hour work week. And of course, one of the big ones, the Prime Minister has announced a solidarity program, a program that seeks to cater to the most vulnerable among us. And this is $1 billion. 1 billion Jamaican dollars is being made available to persons who are not registered on PATH. They are not on the social pension program. They are not on NIS, and they would not have been beneficiaries or persons eligible for the reverse income tax credit. Those persons, listeners, will be getting between $20,000 and $50,000 through the Solidarity Program. Just as we run to the break, I think it would be appropriate to go to this particular song on a morning like this. Initiative of yesteryears, one that had its kinks, but let me use this platform to assure listeners this morning, one of the things we should do as people, you see, is learn from the past. If your father did X, Y, or Z, you should ensure that A, B, and C that you're doing is an improvement, a better version of, and indeed much more successful than that which your father had done. Yeah? Edward Seaga is Andrew Holness's political father. Andrew Holness is Edward Seaga's protege, political son. Edward Seaga presided over Solidarity in the 80s. The Prime Minister, I suspect, as a way of, in part, honoring the late Edward Philip George Seaga, and perhaps paying tribute to him, has elected to name his flagship, yes, social support program, Solidarity. It will no doubt be to the chagrin of some. Prime Minister Holness indicated yesterday that $1 billion Jamaican dollars will be made available to provide support of between $20,000 and $50,000 to vulnerable and needy Jamaicans who are not enrolled on the PATH program. They are not the beneficiaries of a social pension. They are not beneficiaries of the National Insurance Scheme, NIS. And they certainly weren't beneficiaries of the reverse income tax credit. So in other words, these persons, didn't necessarily earn income tax or file income tax and so on. These persons, for the most part, are under resourced. Some of them, no doubt, would not be working. So that is $20,000 to $50,000 to persons who will be eligible under the Solidarity Initiative of Andrew Michael Holness. $1 billion Jamaican dollars set aside for that. We are taking your calls in this segment. The numbers are 876-212-9824. There's also 876-462-0919. We'd really like to hear from our callers. And we facilitate all views on this program. Certainly we do not concur with all views on this program. But we believe that all views should contend, and 1,000 flowers shall bloom. We're not a monolith. We're not an echo chamber. And so people will have their different ways of viewing and perceiving and experiencing the world around them. And we know that people's opinions are shaped largely by how they experience the world and what happens around them. The Housing Agency of Jamaica, based on an announcement by the Prime Minister in his contribution to the budget debate last evening, will be upgrading some 81 informal communities. The HAJ, as we know, yes, is in the business of building out and providing housing solutions that are fairly priced, more competitively priced in the marketplace, so that they can be accessed by lower income earners. And the HAJ is going to be doing tremendous work in 81 informal communities. There are 10,000 housing starts that are to come over the next 4 years through the HAJ. There are 4,000 completed solutions that are to come from the HAJ over the next 4 years. The National Land Agency, listeners, is set to deliver 12,000 titles. And this is over the 4 years they have been operating, the past 4 years. And they've been using the e-titling platform as well. And the NLA, we're told, aims to produce some 8,000 additional titles in the year 2025-2026. The Prime Minister announced certain farming incentives yesterday. Incentives in relation to seed stock and animal feed, I think it was. And the Prime Minister indicated that farmers will benefit from a 20% duty concession on light trucks and panel vans. So you know those Noah or Tony's or highest panel vans, the kind of vehicle that some farmers would use to transport produce. For example, our egg farmers. Yes. This is how you support agriculture in the country. This is how you boost domestic production. So concessions in that regard coming to our farmers. There's a serious assault that is on, an assault on bureaucracy, an assault on inefficiency, an assault on the misery that confront people when they certainly have to do business with government. In relation to motor vehicle registration, there is now going to be a 2-year renewal option, because at present, as motorists may be aware, you may register your motor car or your motor vehicle generally for 6 months or for a year. There's a third option coming now. You may register your motor vehicle for 2 years. So there's a reduced likelihood for you to have to go and interact with the tax office. You don't have to go to the tax office every 6 months or so there's a reduced likelihood for you to have to go and interact with the tax office. You don't have to go to the tax office.